alone the whole, reason why you're probably looking for a job, whether you're laid off, you were let go, the company closed down, the company sold, right? It's a very traumatic experience. And it's incredibly difficult to come out of that victim mindset if you're not self-aware and you're not reframing your mindset to say, okay, this is an opportunity to do something different, or this is an opportunity for me to invest some time in myself, or this is an opportunity to focus on upskilling, right? Or an opportunity to try something new and fail and try again, right? So I think that's really an interesting word that you use with trauma.
Yeah. And I know that word probably gets overused nowadays. Everybody calls everything trauma, but it really is traumatic to lose a job. In fact, it's been said that it's just under losing a loved one in terms of the amount of trauma that you can experience, especially if it's your first job. You put all your identity into it. You have this notion of, I'm just going to consistently rise, and then you get a setback, which most people do. And that setback can really mess with you if you allow it to. But I love the way you said reframing it and taking ownership of your situation and being able to look at things objectively and say, I may have contributed here. Not blame yourself for the fact that you got let go, because a lot of times it's factors that you can't control. But, here's where I could have been better. And then you have an opportunity to get better for the next one. And I think that's really cool. But you mentioned this just a second ago, and I think it's really important for us to spend some time on the biggest thing you're going to deal with when going through a job search, unless you're extremely lucky and the first time you do an interview, they love you, you love them, everything's kumbaya, is you're going to deal with rejection. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Job Seeker's Journey podcast. We are coming to the end of summer, and school is about to start. I know in our household, we are about to start kindergarten for the first time this week. And with that, some stresses may be leaving of having kids at home and having to deal with keeping them entertained, but also there may be some new stresses that are coming into your household as you start school up again. And wherever you are, I hope that you are doing well, in that you are keeping up with your mental health, your physical health, and things are going well in your household. Today's episode is a special one, and one that I'm extremely excited about. Today I'm speaking with Amy Herr. Now, Amy is someone who I've met through a network that has been developed throughout doing this podcast, of talking to Mark Phelan a few weeks ago, and he connected me with Amy and a couple other people who we are having on this podcast very shortly. She's been the VP of operations. She's been a client director, or is a client director. But more than that, she is a great person that is a connector of people and a person who is truly out to see others succeed. And today we're talking about networking. Now, we have talked about networking in the past, but we haven't really dove into some of the nitty-gritty of what we're talking about when it comes to networking. And today we're going to run through a few scenarios. We're going to talk about what should we be doing when we go to networking events, or when we meet people that we've connected with on LinkedIn. What should we be doing? How should we approach networking with other people in hopes that and someday it could lead to a future job opportunity? My conversation with Amy went pretty long, so I'm going to divide it into two different episodes. But today's episode, we're really diving into different scenarios in networking and how we can successfully network with others in order to build that network and hopefully find that next job opportunity. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Amy Herr. All right, I'm here with Amy Herr, and I have gotten to be a part of a network through this podcast that I never would have thought that I got to be in simply by applying to an internship that I didn't know was an internship and getting to meet Mark Phelan. And through him, he introduced me to you and to Elisa, which was on the last episode or one of the last episodes. And it's been a cool little circle that I've gotten to join in the course of this podcast, which has been amazing. And you and I have had quite a few conversations at this point, 2 or 3 already, and they have been fabulous. And I've been looking forward to hitting the record button and getting some of it on record. So, Amy, thank you very much for joining me today and sharing your knowledge with everyone.
Thanks for having me. I mean, it's been a long time coming, so I'm excited for us to finally get to sit down and do this.
Yeah, and that's exciting. And it's been the best part of the podcast is the people that I've gotten to meet over the course of this, and people that I would have never probably ever met in any normal situation. And that's been the coolest thing. But today we're going to dive a little bit deeper into networking. Networking is something that we've talked about in quite a few episodes in different capacities, and we've kind of touched on it, but we've kind of stayed in generalities and just kind of mentioned philosophy of it. And we haven't really dove down into, what should we do when we are networking? And we have a couple different scenarios we'll run through and things like that. But to kind of start out, let's talk about why does it matter so much, especially today in the job market we're in now and what we're seeing with people having so much trouble getting jobs. Why is networking so important and why does it matter so much nowadays?
I mean, just us sitting down having this conversation is a testament to networking, right? So if you hadn't been out there doing what you're doing, there was no way that we would have ever crossed paths otherwise. And we've always been told that saying, it's not about what you know, but it's about who you know. And in this world, we're telecommuting, we rarely leave the house anymore. And if we do, it's on a very as needed basis. So how could anyone know who you are, what you're capable of, and what you're trying to accomplish if you don't talk to anyone? And if you're just going to work and coming home, or, you're just living within your own little friend circle, family circle, your nuclear group, if you're not expanding outside of that, that's basically all you have to work with, which can work sometimes depending on like how big that group is. But oftentimes we all, especially as we get older and we get more in tuned with our area of expertise, like our circle becomes smaller and smaller. And that's why networking is important. You want to get out there so you can meet new people and you never know what could come from it.
Yeah. It's kind of one of those things. Like I wasn't in a fraternity in college. And in some ways I almost wrongfully laughed at them back when I was in school, mostly because I'd hear about some of the like initiation stuff and I'd laugh at that. But the part that I was always a little bit jealous of is the built-in network that comes with being a part of a fraternity or a sorority, and just the commonality that you automatically have to reach out to somebody whenever you're going through something. And you already have that connection, even if you didn't go at the same years or anything like that, you have that connection. And it's similar, obviously, with past employers and all of that. And so let's talk about a little bit about intentions of networking. So I think this could be one of those questions where people are automatically going, well, that's clear, but it's not always probably one thing. So what would you say would be, what is our intentions when we start to network with other people?
Yeah, I actually had a conversation most recently with a friend of mine, and she was like, "Yeah, I network because I need something, because I'm looking for an opportunity, or I'm looking for the right type of person to partner with, or I'm looking for something, right?" So when she goes to network, it's usually when she is in need of something, and that is a common misconception that I hear from people about what their intentions are behind networking, right? Um, I would say, the better way to go about networking and having specific intentions would be about going with an open mind, going with the intention to give first. And it's interesting when you start your networking process that way, is that you're not limiting yourself to who you're going to meet. I've been to networking events before where you can tell the certain individuals who are very, I mean, like it could be the real estate agent or are you looking for a home? Oh, you're not. Okay. I'm going to move on to the next person. um, or, the life insurance person who's like, oh, do you have life insurance? Oh, you've got it. Okay. Or you're not interested. All right. I'm going to move on. So you can tell who those people are. You can pick them out of the group fairly quickly. And the word gets around, right? Especially if you're going to be a regular at in that community or in those networking events, the word gets around, and that doesn't paint an open picture for folks to reach out and then become a circle of trust. Invite you into their circle of trust. So I think how you really build that circle of trust is by intentionally wanting to give first, right? You go to these networking events to see how you can help first, not about how people can help you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of leads into, there's a lot of, I don't know if you've heard of NATO before, and in networking or dating or any kind of relationship building environment, but it's not attached to outcomes. So I've heard this quite a bit from different, groups of friends and peers, and it's going in with not having any kind of expectation, not having, some kind of outcome that you're hoping for. You're literally going just to meet people, to be authentic, to be open, and just learn about them and share about yourself. And hopefully there is a synergy, when you're meeting random people at these networking events.
Sure. And it's so easy to be transactional when you're going through a job search, because you clearly are looking for a job and you're trying to meet people with the hopes that at some point you do meet someone who those things line up. But to your point with the real estate agent, that gets very obvious very quickly. And the hard part is that when you do that, you put all of the onus and all of the action items on that other person who may have just met you for the first time. And now you're saying to them, do you have anything? Do you know anyone who has anything? And now you're putting all the action on them, and they don't even know you. And so it's very hard, I think, because this is the topic that gets brought up almost every interview. And it's been really interesting that this is the thing that no matter what I'm talking about, at some point, it's getting back to the human connection. And to your point, not making it about you, that has been brought up the most. But when we're trying to do that, what are some of the skills that really help to not make it transactional?
Yeah. And I feel like a lot of people avoid networking because they feel it is very transactional or even borderline manipulative, right? Because people think, oh, I'm going to go in and network with people, but I'm going to maneuver some kind of strategy to get them to buy, or I'm going to maneuver some kind of strategy to get them to buy into whatever scheme that you've got going on. Like it's just, and I say scheme a lot because I just joined a UK company and that's what they use for like, equity plans, or so it's not like a negative terminology. It's just, kind of more about, what can they join in on with you? And, I think some skills that would set you up for success to avoid going down that path or falling into that trap is just go with the intention to actively listen and listen more than you talk. Right. I think it's really difficult for people because nerves are high. You're anxious because this is not something that is comfortable for the majority of people. And something that other people should keep in mind is that most everyone is in the same spot as you are. They're feeling the same way. They're anxious, they're nervous, they're uncomfortable because they have to go into a room of strangers and talk about themselves or learn, just start random conversations with people where you have no idea where the conversation is going to go. So active listening is just so important when you start networking. It keeps you from driving, what underlying motives you might have. It just allows you to really soak in the environment, be present, and then really just hear what that person's saying. Another skill that I think is really good is to kind of get your story together. Talk about yourself, but tell the story. And when you tell the story and you're not, just kind of like, oh, I'm an IT consultant, when you give them more than that to work with, it allows more room for creativity, room for those discoveries to happen, little tidbits that might lead them to say, hey, I know someone who's doing something similar, or, and that's when the connections happen and the networking does kind of bear fruit, right? So storytelling. And then the last thing I think that is super important that I don't think enough people do is following up. Great. You've gone to a networking event. You've met 20 great people. But then if you don't ever talk to them again, out of sight, out of mind, right? So following up just allows you to stay top of mind because it may not be that first conversation or the second one or the third one. It could be something that's a year down the line that you guys have a light bulb moment, and that is the opportunity that you've been trying to uncover from all your conversations and the years of relationships. And a lot of it has to do with trust too, right? You're building the trust, you're getting to know each other unfiltered, and that allows for some really cool things to surface.
Yeah, and I was telling you right before we hit record that I had a question that came to my mind this just today, as I was thinking about this conversation. My wife and I are quite different, in that I'm a pretty big extrovert and she's a pretty big introvert. And it took me a long time to understand the difference there, just in social situations in general. But it got me thinking about this networking piece, because the question that popped in my mind was, would it be better if you are an extrovert, or would it be better if you are an introvert? And at first, it seemed like there was an obvious answer, which would be extrovert, because you're more comfortable around people, you get energy from people, those kind of things. But knowing myself, I have a tendency to overtalk. And that is kind of my nervous tick, even, is I just almost get more animated if I'm nervous, because that's just what comes out of me. But in your mind, what do you think? Is there a better way, or do you just got to understand who you are and understand kind of what your goal is for this meeting and go into it that way? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think, obviously introverts and extroverts come with their strengths, right? And I think in a networking event, having both is excellent because the extrovert is usually the one who gets everyone talking. The introverts are excellent at active listening. And so there's a give and take. In my experience, I do feel that introverts are very good at networking because they're so intent and present on hearing you out. And a lot of times they don't want to talk about themselves, right? So they allow you to do all the talking, and then they pick up little tidbits, right? They analyze it, and then they give it back to you in the conversation. So I do think that introverts have a very unique way of networking, and they do really well in those environments. However, extroverts, they really get, they energize the group. If it was a room full of introverts, I wonder if they would ever introduce themselves, right? And get past that anxious moment of saying, hello, my name is, and this is who I am. So I think the extroverts, really bring the dynamic to the group, but I think the introverts are really good at digging deep and really finding the special little tidbits that will create the synergies for people. So I don't know if I would say either or is better, but introverts are definitely better at active listening. Extroverts are really good at breaking the ice. So it's good to have a mix of both.
Yeah, I love that you say that because there's definitely things that you can take from either one. So like, because my wife is introverted, she's also far more prepared a lot of times to have a conversation because she needs to do that preparation in order to feel comfortable enough to get into that conversation, especially if it's something important like a networking thing or something like that. So she gets more prepared, which you do got to do work before you get there to have an effective conversation. If you know quite a bit about that person, the company they work for, if you know what kind of problems they would face and how you might fit into that, now you can have an effective conversation. But if you don't do any of that work, then you're kind of flying blind in that realm. And that doesn't necessarily work well for you either, in that it kind of starts to become a little bit more transactional because you don't know much about them and you're trying to get them to talk. But if they're introverted, and it can get really, really interesting. But the other thing that just popped into my mind, and I'm sorry I'm talking so much, but
that's all good.
The other thing that just popped into my mind is it's important to know, in my opinion, how you are in different situations. And where this really popped into my mind is, how are you if you're at a bar and you drink? How does that make you act? Does that make you more chatty? Is that good? Is that bad? I know for myself, I had to quit drinking a couple years ago. And part of that was that all of those extroverted characteristics would get amplified after a couple. And it would really become more about me and all of these things. And I wasn't like the angry guy or any of those things, but it was things like that. So doing a happy hour back then would have not been the best place for me to meet somebody. Or at the very least, I would need to be conscious and say, okay, I can only have one, or I should get a virgin something or whatever in order to try to know who I am. So I think that's important to keep in mind too, of you want to present your best self, but you need to know how you present yourself in different situations. And if it's not the best situation that for you to present yourself, maybe that's not the situation you should get yourself into when you meet somebody at a networking event, which is easier said than done. A lot of networking events are happy hours, I was going
to say, yeah, I mean,
are those kind of things, but just know how you are.
Yeah.
And know that maybe I shouldn't partake if I'm really trying to meet people in this particular situation. But I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No, it's okay. As they say, business is usually done after hours, right? And it's typically at those events because people do, have a drink or two, they loosen up, they're more willing to chat about, doing business, right? And being, very upfront about it. Where if you were in a office setting or, it's a little bit more, professional setting, like the shop talk happens, but it's on a surface level. So to your point, I am an extreme lightweight. I always have been, but after the college years, I know that if I have a drink, I'm basically no good anymore. I just slur my words. I can't think clearly. So for me, I just don't partake, but I do go to a lot of networking events that happen at bars or after hours or places with an open bar even, right? So, that you're absolutely right. It is good to be really self-aware and conscious of maybe, different traps or different, I don't know what the right word is, like, different factors that could bring out, not the best in you, right? So it's definitely good to be aware of that. And I mean, to your point, there's just so many different ways that you could do networking wrong. But I feel like that is, one of the lesser, impactful things that you have to worry about. Cause I feel like if you, say if you do have a few drinks, Brad, and you get really extroverted, I don't think that's going to count against you more than say like if you went in hardcore and it's like, hey, I need ABCD. Who do you know here that has that? Do you know anyone that does this? Right. And you're just too aggressive going in and looking for your specific selfish need. Right. Another thing that I've experienced at networking events, that I would advise people to maybe refrain from doing is not being present. Right. When you're so focused on trying to meet a specific kind of person that whoever you're speaking with, yeah, they may not be the right person, but you're still in a conversation with them. And I've had people kind of look around, scan the room as they were in an active conversation with someone else, right? So there is no better way to burn a bridge, right? So stay focused, be present, listen in on that person as they're talking to you. And if it's time to, wrap up the conversation and move on, there are different ways to do that, right? Without being rude and without acting like you're giving all the nonverbal cues that you're ready to exit the conversation.
Sure.
Or the other, I guess surefire way to have networking not be, not become like a source of benefits for you is if you are only doing it when you need something, right? And you're not consistently doing it. If you're only ever going out to network when you're like, oh man, I really need, since this podcast is about jobs, I really need a job. So I'm going to go out and network right now because I need it. But for the last 10 years, you've done no networking, right? So, it's really difficult because it is a long game. You do have to build up that network, build up the relationships, and it takes time.
Sure. Yeah. And I think that's why it's really important with what you said first of, if you're in a situation where you have to have a job, now, yes, you want to go to these networking events, but it's far easier to just have an authentic conversation with somebody if you are not in need of anything and you're able to just meet people and become friends with people and at least be good contacts with each other to ask questions or, feed information for free or whatever that relationship looks like. But one of the things I thought would be kind of fun, since we're diving a little bit into this topic, is to look at a couple different scenarios of networking and try to walk through them a little bit, because I feel like there's a little bit of a difference in all of these different scenarios in terms of maybe what you should do beforehand, while you're there, those kind of things. So the first one I think we've been touching on quite a bit already, which is your networking events where you don't really know anyone, or maybe you know a couple coworkers, but you don't really know any of the people that are there, and you're there trying to literally build a network. What would be the strategy that you think someone should come into an event like that with in order to get the most out of that event?
Oh, man. I mean, it's always great when you can go with a battle buddy, right? When you have someone that you can look comfortable with and approach other people in a group, that makes it a little less daunting. But if you don't know anyone there, I would say the best way to prepare yourself is just to prepare to be uncomfortable. Like, just be ready for it, embrace it. Just do the thing that, eat the frog first. Do the thing that you dread most. And it might just be that first hello, introduction. And I think it just gets easier too if you just kind of think about like, what's the worst that could happen, right? I go to this event and I say hello and someone says, don't talk to me. Or I don't know what's the worst that could happen in a networking event, because everyone's there to do the same thing, right? And if you're an introvert, hopefully you find an extrovert who just gets you warmed up and starts introducing you to other groups of people that they've already met. Or if you're an extrovert, find that introvert and help bring them along, because you never know what nice little golden nuggets you're going to get from them, since they're usually pretty reserved, but typically they have some pretty good golden nuggets that they're hanging on to.
Sure. Yeah, and I think that your point about active listening is really important at these kind of events, because if there's one thing that you find out over the course of life is that people really like talking about themselves and really tend to think that a conversation went really well with you if they're talking about themselves. Similarly, in interviews, if you can get the company talking more and ask them good questions and get them talking and telling you things, then those conversations tend to look at those pretty favorably, because, people like talking about themselves. And so if you can have some good starter questions that you can ask somebody to get somebody talking, whether that be something silly or something, just a really good question, then I feel like you can really start to do well in a situation like that. But if you're coming into it thinking, gosh, I got to get some information out to people, then you're going to be looking for those little avenues. It could get weird. They may not come up with something. You may have a weird transition. So I think if you had a strategy of really trying to ask more questions than you talk, then that could be really effective in an event like that, because then you have an opportunity when you follow up to say, hey, I remember our conversation. I really enjoyed meeting you. And I thought it was really cool that you liked this. Or I thought that we had a very similar way of thinking when you said this. And then you have something that they're going to remember that they said that. And so now you have something that you're building in common with them. So I think that's a really cool thing that you're mentioning there.
Very true. I mean, if you're following up with people, but you're doing a generic follow-up, that's not going to make you memorable, right? I had a peer tell me one time that he signed up for a networking event, never went, and then he just sent an email out to the entire group saying, hey, it was so nice to meet everyone. But everyone's like, I don't remember you. We didn't meet. Right. And so that doesn't leave a warm, fuzzy feeling in people. And so, it's definitely good when you follow up and you have pieces of information to relay back to. And you're absolutely right. If you go into a networking event with some strategy on questions you want to ask, right? Not strategy on getting what you want, but what you want to learn from people. And it could be something as simple as, how did you hear about this networking event? Or, what led you up to being here tonight? Those are some interesting questions to start with, because that opens the door for them to start telling you about their story, right? Or telling you how, usually it's like what brought them there is their business or a need or, and so you're asking for it, giving them, right? This is when we talked about go there to give first. You're giving them an opportunity to share that information, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a really, really good point that you had, that go in with some questions. And, other things you can do to prepare as well, since we're kind of on that topic, is I know this is really silly, but your inner monologue, right? Before you go, be your biggest cheerleader, hype yourself up. You got this. What's the worst that can happen, right? If you come out of this networking event and met no one great, there's going to be another networking event, right? And then you keep trying. And I think that really, and that does a lot, just to kind of get you amped up, get your confidence up, and get you prepared to be uncomfortable.
Sure. Yeah. And everybody's in the same boat, right?
Everyone's in the same boat.
Everybody's probably thinking the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And, trust yourself. You're good who you are, and don't try to change who you are, because then that can get weird later on. So you're good how you are.
Yeah. I mean, that is so important to show up and be authentic, because people can see, they can sense that. If you're not being authentic, you might as well just go leave the networking event and start again, start fresh at another networking event. Because I think if you're not authentic, that doesn't allow a lot of room for organic things to happen, organic conversations, ideas, synergies. Yeah.
So another scenario that came to mind is that, LinkedIn's great for connecting with people that you're hoping to become contacts with, and you're hoping to have as one of your professional contacts. And it's real easy to send a message and say, hey, I'd love to connect, and all these things. And then maybe through that, you ask them if they would like to meet, just to discuss, to meet each other a bit more, maybe face to face, and just get to know each other better. But you don't necessarily have a specific job in mind. Maybe they just work at a target company that you would love to work at, or they just have a role that you're trying to aspire to get to. What do you think the strategy in that, once you schedule a face-to-face meeting and you sit down with them, what do you think the strategy is that may be a little bit different from I'm just going to an event and meeting as many people as I can?
Yeah. I mean, if you've been able to get a face-to-face, meetup with someone on LinkedIn at a company, in that very specific scenario, you need to give yourself a pat on the back, because that is incredibly difficult to do, right? More often than not, you're going to get no's or, people that aren't really interested because they already know what your intention is. But if you do get a face-to-face, I would be really intentional in that situation, because they know what you're looking for, right? So you could say, hey, look, I would love to pick your brain about what's the best way to get into that company. And, I would like to understand, if you can give me some insights on what's going on there. Are they really hiring? Is there a hiring freeze? Like, what's a hiring process like? I think in those scenarios, if you're really upfront and honest, that goes a lot further than doing the, oh, hi, I just want to get to know you, right? Because they're like, well, if that's the case, then I wouldn't have made time for this, right? So if you are very intentional on your messaging with LinkedIn, you've gotten them to agree to a meeting with you, a coffee, whatever it might be, then you really need to be specific about what you want to talk to them. You've asked them for their time, right? So they're giving it to you, knowing what you've already, what your intentions are. So in that scenario, I think it's really good to be intentional then and really use that time, because it's very similar to like an informational interview, right? And I learned about informational interviews for the first time in college. I think it was my sophomore year, and the university I was going to, part of the program was to reach out to professionals in the field that you wanted to get into. In my case, it was, medical doctors, and to do informational interviews with them to understand what the path looked like, what the lifestyle is like in that career, which I thought was such a gift because when you're a college kid, people are definitely more open, right, to giving you 15 minutes of their day to ask them questions about, their profession or their path. But in today's world, if you're a 15, 20-year veteran, or you're 5 years in, or you're just starting out in your career, people are still pretty open to doing those informational interviews. And that's kind of what that sounds like, that scenario with LinkedIn. You are asking someone for specific information about whether, the path that they took was linear, or, how did that work for them to get to where they are now, because you would like to follow a similar path, or, maybe just not even the same job, but in this case, the same company. What was your path to get into the company, and what are your recommendations and advice? And yes, you still have to build a relationship with that person. You still have to build trust because they're giving you, information, insider information for the most part. So I think in those scenarios, it's good to be really intentional, really specific, and respectful of their time as well.
Yeah. And I do think it's important too. Like if you are getting to meet them face to face, go to them.
Absolutely.
Like make it as easy on them as possible. So if they can do coffee, try to find a coffee shop near their place of business. If they can only do lunch, try to be as close to their place as possible so that they're not having to travel. Try to take some of that burden off of them. And then you're showing them that, hey, I'm not just out for myself. I want to make this as easy as possible for you. I know I'm asking you questions, definitely pay for lunch and pay for coffee if they'll let you. Sometimes they won't let you, but, at least offer that. Make sure that you are showing them that, hey, I care about you. And I care about getting, I am asking you questions, but I'm trying to learn from you. I'm not trying to, and I think you're right. I think your messaging on LinkedIn is important. And, especially if you have an open to work banner and you get a hold of somebody, they're going to know that you're looking for a job. But again, it's kind of how you approach it that will let their guard down. Because if they think that they're going to have to try to come up with something for you, then they're most likely going to say no. They probably don't have time for that. And they're, all of these things. But if you can approach it like an informational interview, I love that you said that, of, hey, I just want to learn from you. Like, I'm trying to get into this. You're somebody that has been doing this for a long time. I've heard that you're well respected in this field. A lot of people have recommended that I try to reach out to you. Well, whatever that conversation looks like, then maybe their guard comes down a little bit, and do your research to be able to try to come up with, hey, have you guys had issues with this? Have you seen this? Because I've experienced this, and try to show that you have value past, hey, I need you to help me find something. So I love that you said that.
Help me get into your company. Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't do that. But
yeah.
I think that's the biggest, I think that's the biggest way to have people kind of shrink back, when you are, when you're asking them to do something for you and they don't know who you are. Right. And and it's something beyond the, hey, can I have 15 minutes of your day? Make it, like you said, make it easy for them.
Sure. Well, let's do one more. And I think this one is probably one that happens the most. And if you're observant and you're present, you'll probably notice that this happens the most. I know when my wife and I moved where we are now, we are just south of a really affluent area. So there's a lot of people that go to the same Starbucks we do, that go to the same gyms that we do, that are high in companies and things like that. And you do get a chance to just meet people. So the last scenario I think would be great to talk about is that random person that you come across at a gym, at a coffee shop, at Walmart, whatever the situation is, and you just start talking to them about whatever, and then you find out what they do and who they are, and you want to try to build that relationship more. What do you think the approach is there? It's probably similar to LinkedIn, but it could even be a little bit more casual because you are already face to face and you're building a rapport about whatever you're doing at that particular moment.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it doesn't happen as often anymore, especially this day and age. Maybe 10, 15 years ago, I feel like people were more willing to engage with each other in public. But I do have a recent story of a similar situation where I was on a flight on my way to a conference, and the person who sat next to me, seemingly nice person. I don't usually talk to people on the plane. I'm usually working, or I take advantage of, the time to maybe take a nap, squeeze in a nap. And we just started chatting. And usually when that happens, that tells you that the other person is open and willing, right? So you take that opportunity and you just, be authentic, active listening, be curious, just start asking questions. And lo and behold, this person, him and I, we spoke for an hour or two on the flight, and then didn't really talk the rest of the flight. But then right at the end, we're like, hey, let's swap, social information, right? So LinkedIn. And then a month or two later down the road, he reached back out to me to say, hey, you remember that thing that we were talking about on the plane? I think I might have something for you, right? And so I think it's just leaving it very fluid, just giving each other a way to still get in touch with each other, right? But not being too aggressive unless there is an actionable item, right? So like say if in that initial conversation, you did know someone that, and how can you give to them, right? And that's what you should be listening for in those random situations too, is how can you give to them what they're, looking for? Because then that gives you a good follow-up, right? And vice versa. Maybe they're a really great networker and they're listening to what they can give you, right? And they follow up with you. So I think, it goes both ways, but the things that you can control, right, is listening, looking for that opportunity to give them something, because then that gives you an opportunity to, reach back out for the follow-up. And then if it, is reciprocated, then it's going to be a back and forth, like tossing the ball back and forth to each other, right? And then eventually you end up playing basketball together. I don't know. Right. Trying to find a good analogy, but that was terrible.
that was good. That makes sense. Well, that'll do it for this episode of the Job Seeker's Journey podcast. I want to thank Amy for coming on. I want to thank her for her friendship, for her candor, and for being a part of my network now and being someone who I can always go to and rely on. She's an amazing person. Definitely look her up, connect with her on LinkedIn. She will be an amazing resource for you. As always, if this is your first time hitting the play button, it's an honor that you were willing to do that. And I do not take that for granted. If you're someone who has listened to this for a long time, I just can't thank you enough. But I am going to ask you to do a couple of things for me. One, if you know someone who's going through a job search and is struggling to find that next opportunity, is spinning their wheels, is doing what I call the definition of insanity, of continually trying to do the same things and it's just not producing results, please send this podcast to them in hopes that it encourages them and helps them find that next opportunity. I'm also going to ask you, if you're listening to this on Spotify or any other place where you can get a podcast, please like and review this podcast. That helps me get in front of more people. And if you're on YouTube, please like, subscribe, place a comment, start a conversation, help this get in front of more people in hopes that it is encouraging and is bringing useful information for them in their job search. But that'll do it for this episode of the Job Seeker's Journey podcast. We'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.